Look, I don't know if attacking Iran was the correct decision. We won't know until the war is over. This video isn't supposed to convince you whether it is a good or bad war. I'm attempting to explain what I believe is the rationale US policymakers used to justify the war. First lesson of geopolitics. No one is more powerful than the state, and a state's ultimate goal is security. Ditto international law, allies, or the accepted version of human rights. We always hear this phrase, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. Not in geopolitics. The whole is greater than the sum. One great nation is more powerful than a collection of smaller nations because these smaller, allied nations have competing interests, whereas the single, large nation is absolute in its goals. I want you to remember the next quote for the rest of the video from John Mearsheimer, the leading geopolitical academic who is against the war. States recognize that the more powerful they are relative to their rivals, the better chances of survival. Indeed, the best guarantee of survival is to be a hegemon, because no other state can seriously threaten such a mighty power. What does this mean? That states want power because it achieves their primary goal of security. Wars are fought largely for increased security through the annexation of additional land, resources, or to just weaken a rival power before they threaten you. Wars are rarely fought over the lines of morality, and usually that is just an excuse to help explain the rationality of the war to the public. Because who defines morality? Who defines good or evil? That is something every individual disagrees on. Even more so, every culture disagrees on. But even so, let's briefly explore the morality argument. For this war, the morality argument, from the standpoint of the United States, would be that Iranians have suffered for many decades without the same freedoms we enjoy, and freedoms they once enjoyed. Most importantly, the killings of tens of thousands of Iranians at the beginning of this year. But once again, wars are not fought over morals, even when so many die. Did we step in against Pol Pot, against Mao, against Lenin or Stalin, against the Kim dynasty, despite millions dying from direct actions of these regimes? No, and despite the atrocities committed, the risk of losing American lives and resources was not deemed to be worth the potential reward. This is why many people are against the current war, and this is a very fair argument. What is the price of a US soldier? Is it worth a free Iran, a potential major ally? A potential key factor in deterring war with China that could cost thousands of US lives? I don't have the answer to these questions, and even if I did, they wouldn't exactly line up with your answer. So then who is correct? Whose course of action do we take? Whose values do we follow? These are very difficult questions with real consequences for today and future generations, and why policymakers are so divided over the concept of war. When we go to war, we want something. It could be as simple as maintaining security, such as retaliating against Japan in 1941, or maintaining the current balance of power. In the case of Iran today, it is about changing the balance of power, of giving the United States more comparative power over everybody else, primarily China, and to a lesser extent, Russia. Let's move on to what I believe are the primary factors in going to war now. Before the war started, the US-Iran power gap was at its widest in decades. The US had momentum from the nuclear facility strikes last year and the recent, almost flawless capture of Maduro. The Islamic Republic of Iran had negative momentum. The Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas are all weaker than before October 7th, 2023. And now, despite thousands being slaughtered in the streets, Iranian civilians are still protesting for change. The Iranians now value change for future generations over their own lives. This is how wars of independence start. This is how civil wars start. And if you're going to invade another country, as the US is doing now, then it's a lot easier if the people whose land you're going into welcome you with open arms and actively support you. The next factor, security. The most important goal of a state is its survival and the security of its people. Reports are claiming that the Islamic Republic of Iran is responsible for the death of over 1,000 Americans since 1979, plus the taking of American civilian hostages. In recent years, Iran's government has burned the American flag, chanted death to America, and labeled the United States as the Great Satan. These are actions to radicalize the people into wanting war with America. Clearly, they do not like us, and it would be foolish of us to ever trust an acting government with this type of public rhetoric against us, especially considering the actions closely mirror their speech. Most importantly is the topic of nuclear weapons and proliferation. No government wants another to have a nuclear weapon, even allies. This is more true with a nation such as Iran, and a very dangerous part of the world with very poor neighborly relations and funds terrorism. What if Hamas, Hezbollah, or another group gets their hands on a nuke? It's a scary thought to think about. And just like with the Soviet Union, if the Islamic Republic of Iran falls, then other nations will have to go in and secure the nuclear sites to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Saudi Arabia has already declared that they will acquire a nuclear weapon if Iran does. Who will go for one next? Turkey? Egypt? Iraq finally? There's already evidence that Israel has nukes. Every minor conflict will put the entire world on the edge of catastrophe, just like we have seen with India and Pakistan recently. The truth is, we don't know how close Iran was to getting nuclear capabilities. You don't know. I don't know. The media doesn't know. Only a very select few in the upper echelons of US and Israeli intelligence know, plus the top IRGC members, who are already dead. None of these people are going to tell us the exact truth. They're just not. Moving away from nuclear weapons, destroying the Iranian regime will also significantly weaken major terrorist groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, reducing the threat of these proxies against U.S. interests and the world economy. Terrorism in 2023 cost an estimated 8,300 lives, but this number can spike rapidly. In 2014, for example, over 45,000 people were killed by terrorists. There are also trillions in economic damage, including direct costs such as buildings and infrastructure being destroyed, and indirect costs, such as increased security spending, decreased foreign direct investment, or loss of tourism and other industry. Yes, there are other terror groups out there that could gain power, such as Al-Shabaab, ISIS, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, but that's not good enough excuse to allow these others to thrive. As I said in my last video, China is a major buyer of heavily discounted Iranian oil, without which the industrial complex of China would suffer. Industry is directly tied into the Chinese economy, and as John Mearsheimer points out once again, a state's potential power is based on the size of its population and the level of its wealth. China has the second largest population in the world and the second largest economy as well, plus the largest industrial base. If its industrial base suffers a major hit, such as being cut off from 40% of its oil imports, then its economy will be hit, and subsequently its military power. This is the most important factor for U.S. policymakers, as just like in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, every foreign policy decision has to be made with the rising Chinese empire in mind. Gaining more influence over the Strait of Hormuz would also ensure every major sea line of communication or major shipping choke point would be under heavy U.S. influence. As mentioned in the previous video, China relies more on shipping lanes than the United States, as a much greater portion of its economy is based on international trade. The Strait of Hormuz in particular is important for oil and gas. If the U.S. controls it, then we can close it if a major U.S.-Sino conflict erupts. Or, a less escalatory measure, it means that China will have to pay market prices for oil and gas, reducing economic leverage. U.S. influence over the strait, simply put, means more oil and gas for allies and less for China. Those were the primary reasons advocating for U.S. involvement. Here are some secondary factors to consider. Iran can potentially become a great ally of the United States in a strategic geographical location. Imagine a nation with the natural wealth and education of Iran being an ally, not an enemy. It would be a huge blow to the so-called axis of resistance and exponentially increase U.S. influence in the Middle East. In my opinion, this could even be the catalyst for finally moving U.S. troops out of the Middle East. If Iran becomes a great ally, then the largest current sponsor of terrorism will instead be looking to root out and eliminate terrorist groups instead of propping them up. Iran has the potential power to do this. Although this will take time, it will be welcome from the United States, as both sides of the political spectrum have advocated for bringing the troops home over recent years. The problem is no president wants to be remembered for leaving a power vacuum in the Middle East that becomes filled by a group such as ISIS. We saw what happened in Afghanistan, and no one wants to make that mistake again. For the current U.S. administration, there is a major focus on fighting the cartels. Iran works closely with the cartels because it brings in cash and helps destabilize the United States. This would be another source of funding cut off for the cartels. Because remember, cartels do not just make money from drugs. They rely on foreign support, extortion, control of resources, arms trading, human trafficking, and so much more. Last point, and this one comes with a disclaimer. I do not know enough about the Kurdish situation or history to make a reliable analysis. These are just some thoughts, and hopefully someone watching can help me understand better. So whether you agree with their actions or not, the Kurdish people have been an ally of the United States the last few decades. If they support the effort against Iran, perhaps they will find sanctuary and potential support for more self-autonomy as repayment. It seems like we have not held our end of the bargain with the Kurds for past support they have given us, and the skepticism we are now seeing is understandable. Even so, the U.S. is not a hostile force for the Kurds. The Iranian regime is. And the bottom line is if the regime in Tehran falls, then the Kurds will be rid of a hostile force. Therefore, I think it is likely they will get involved for their own security. For the United States, it could be a chance to finally repay the Kurdish people for their support in the war on terror. Wow, that was a lot. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Let me know what you think. My current plan is that after one more video focused on the current situation in Iran, regarding why I do not think it will become another Iraq, Afghanistan, or Libya type mess, I'm looking to make videos on other regions, so stay tuned. Later.